History doesn't lie, and when you study the patterns of collapse, one thing becomes undeniable. Before the bullets run out, before the power grids fail completely, before the hospitals close their doors, the food disappears. And when the food disappears, civilization doesn't just crack, it shatters into 1,000 desperate pieces where neighbors become threats, and survival becomes the only currency that matters. If you're serious about making it through what's coming, then stay with me, because what I'm about to share could mean the difference between your family eating or starving when the world turns dark. And if you want to be among those who survive, hit that subscribe button right now, because this channel doesn't give you comfort. It gives you the brutal truth you need to stay alive. Throughout recorded history, food has been weaponized more consistently than any bomb or bullet. In 1932 and 1933, Stalin's Soviet regime deliberately created the Holodomor famine in Ukraine, a man-made catastrophe that killed millions of people by confiscating grain, blocking food supplies, and turning starvation into state policy. This wasn't an accident or a natural disaster. This was food used as a weapon to crush resistance and consolidate power. Jump forward to the Nigerian Civil War in the late 1960s, where military forces declared starvation a legitimate weapon of war and cut off food to entire regions, sentencing hundreds of thousands to death by hunger. During the siege of Leningrad in World War II, the Nazi regime attempted to starve an entire city into submission, resulting in hundreds of thousands of deaths. And more recently, during the Syrian civil war that began in 2011, President Bashar al-Assad ran what was documented as a starvation until submission campaign, using food control as a tactical weapon to break opposition forces. These aren't distant legends, they're documented realities showing that when power structures collapse or conflict erupts, food becomes the first and most devastating weapon deployed. Right now, in 2025, we're watching this same pattern repeat itself across the globe. The Global Report on Food Crises released this year shows that more than 295 million people across 53 countries are experiencing acute hunger. That's an increase of 13.7 million people from just the previous year. In Gaza, Sudan, South Sudan, Haiti, and Mali, 1.9 million people are in catastrophic hunger conditions, teetering on the brink of famine. In Sudan, famine has already been confirmed in Zamzam camp. And in Gaza, more than 500,000 people were facing starvation conditions as of mid-2025. These crises aren't caused by lack of food on the planet. They're caused by conflict, economic collapse, and the deliberate weaponization of food supplies. When armed groups looted the Al-Bashir hospital in Khartoum, Sudan, they didn't just steal medicine. They stole 2,200 cartons of ready-to-use therapeutic food meant for malnourished children, along with supplements for pregnant women and primary healthcare supplies. That's not random looting. That's stripping away the most vulnerable population's ability to survive. The pattern is clear. Conflict drives food insecurity, and food insecurity drives desperation, which ignites more conflict in a vicious cycle that tears societies apart. What most people don't understand is that food security isn't just about having enough crops in the ground. South Africa learned this the hard way during the riots and civil unrest in 2021, when looting and violence swept through KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng provinces. South Africa is a net exporter of food, producing more than enough to feed its population. But when violence blocked roads and disrupted supply chains, food couldn't reach the people who needed it. KwaZulu-Natal produces sugar, milk, and poultry products, and serves as the entry point for imported wheat, rice, and palm oils through the Durban port. When those supply routes were cut, even a food-secure nation faced immediate threats to accessibility and stability. This is the reality preppers need to burn into their minds. Having food in warehouses or fields doesn't matter if it can't reach your table. And when civil unrest erupts, which history shows happens during economic collapse, unemployment spikes, and social inequality, the food supply becomes the first casualty. The evidence from recent years proves this isn't theoretical. Conflict, economic shocks, climate extremes, and forced displacement are the documented drivers of food insecurity worldwide, and every single one of those factors is accelerating. The 2008 global food crisis triggered food riots in more than 30 countries because prices spiked and availability dropped. When people can't feed their families, they don't sit quietly. They take to the streets, and peaceful protests can rapidly turn into violent looting when hunger becomes desperate. Experts have been warning that food shortages are a direct predictor of civil unrest. And the connection between empty stomachs and social chaos is not a correlation. It's a causal relationship backed by decades of data. So here's the critical question. When food becomes weaponized, when supply chains collapse, when your neighborhood descends into chaos and desperate people start looking for anything to feed their children, how do you defend what you've stored? Because make no mistake, if you've prepared and your neighbors haven't, you become a target the moment word gets out that you have supplies. Operational security, which military forces call OPSEC, becomes your first line of defense. Navy SEAL training emphasizes that in long-term emergencies, secrecy equals survival. You cannot advertise your preparations publicly. You cannot discuss your stockpile with acquaintances, and you absolutely cannot let people see you moving large quantities of supplies into your home. Be discreet when you purchase and transport emergency food, and once it's inside your home, keep blackout curtains to control light at night and limit noise that could signal to outsiders that you have power, food, or resources they don't have. But stealth alone won't protect you when determined looters come knocking. Physical security upgrades transform your home from a soft target into a hardened fortress that makes attackers think twice. Start with entry points. Install solid core doors with heavy-duty deadbolts and metal strike plates that can withstand forced entry attempts. Standard residential doors and frames will fail under sustained kicking or ramming, but reinforced doors with multi-point locking systems create a significant barrier. Windows are the next vulnerability. Apply shatter-resistant film or install polycarbonate panels that prevent easy break-ins. Security shutters add another layer of protection that can be deployed when threats increase. Don't forget your garage, which is often the weakest point in home security. Install locking bars or internal bracing to prevent forced entry through garage doors. Perimeter security creates your second defensive layer. Fencing made from sturdy materials like metal or concrete slows down intruders and forces them to make noise and spend time, which are your allies in a defensive situation. Plant thorny bushes or dense vegetation around vulnerable entry points like ground floor windows. Attackers will avoid routes that cause injury or slow their movement. Motion sensor lighting and visible security cameras serve as powerful deterrents because opportunistic looters will choose easier targets over homes that have active defenses. Think in terms of layered defense. Deterrence stops casual threats, delay gives you time to respond, and denial protects your most critical assets. Inside your home, designate and prepare a safe room where your family can retreat if your outer defenses are breached. This room should have reinforced walls, a solid door with a heavy lock, and emergency supplies including water, food, first aid, communication tools, and if legal in your area, defensive weapons. The safe room strategy isn't about defeating attackers in combat. It's about creating a final stronghold that buys you time until threats pass or help arrives. In a true SHTF scenario where law enforcement response is non-existent, your safe room could be the difference between life and death. Early warning systems don't need to be high-tech to be effective. In extended emergencies, power grids often fail, making electronic systems worthless. Low-tech solutions like tripwires connected to bells or cans, perimeter alarms that make noise when triggered, and even a well-trained dog can alert you to approaching threats long before they reach your doors. The goal is to eliminate surprise. Awareness gives you time to secure your family, arm yourself, and make defensive decisions rather than reacting in panic. Now let's talk about the food itself, because defending an empty pantry is pointless. Building a defensible food stockpile requires military-level planning, redundancy, diversification, and strategic placement. Never store all your supplies in one location. If looters find your primary cache, or if fire or flooding destroys one area of your home, you lose everything. Distribute your food storage across multiple locations, some in your basement, some in a concealed closet, some in a secondary property if you have one. Hiding your preps is a fail-safe strategy. If your main supply is discovered and looted, you still have backup plans that keep your family alive. The types of food you store directly impact your survival capability. Focus on non-perishable, nutrient-dense foods that provide the balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats your body needs to function under stress. Freeze-dried meals have become the gold standard in emergency preparedness because they offer 25-year shelf lives when properly stored and provide complete nutrition in lightweight, compact packages. Companies have developed freeze-dried food systems specifically designed for 3-month, 6-month, and 12-month emergency scenarios. delivering approximately 180,000 calories per person for a 3-month supply. These systems maintain nutritional variety and prevent food fatigue, which is critical for morale and health during extended crises. But don't rely solely on freeze-dried meals. Canned goods, including meats, vegetables, and fruits, provide reliable nutrition and familiar comfort foods that reduce psychological stress during emergencies. Dry staples like rice, beans, pasta, and oats are calorie-dense, cheap to stockpile in bulk, and have excellent shelf lives when stored properly. High-calorie foods like nuts, seeds, oils, and peanut butter deliver concentrated energy that sustains you when physical demands increase. Remember that in a survival situation, calories are currency. Your body burns more energy under stress, cold, and physical labor, so pack your stockpile with calorie-rich options. Storage methods determine whether your food lasts 25 years or spoils in 25 months. Food-grade buckets are the foundation of long-term storage, but don't just dump rice or beans directly into buckets. Seal food inside Mylar bags with oxygen absorbers first. Then place those bags inside food-grade buckets for an airtight, redundant preservation system that protects against moisture, oxygen, pests, and light. Vacuum sealing extends shelf life for almost any food, and when paired with other methods like dehydrating, it creates maximum longevity. For those serious about ultimate shelf life, freeze-drying is the superior preservation method. This is why emergency food companies specialize in freeze-dried products. Home freeze dryers aren't cheap, but for preppers committed to long-term food security, the investment pays dividends in decades of preserved nutrition. Environmental controls are non-negotiable. Store your food in cool, dry locations away from direct sunlight, heat sources, and moisture. Basements are ideal if they're not prone to flooding. Avoid attics where temperature fluctuations and heat degrade food quality. Never store food near solvents, cleaners, gasoline, or chemicals that can leak fumes or contaminate your supplies. Implement a rotation system where you use the oldest items first and replace them with fresh stock. This prevents waste and ensures your emergency food is always within its optimal shelf life. Preparation planning separates amateurs from survivors. Stockpiling food that requires extensive cooking, excessive water, or resources you won't have in a disaster is a fatal mistake. If you lose power and gas, how will you heat your freeze-dried meals or cook your rice? Pack backup cooking methods like portable camping stoves, fuel supplies, and fire-starting equipment. Consider that water may be scarce. Foods that require minimal water for preparation are strategic choices. And don't forget variety. Eating the same bland meal every day for weeks destroys morale and can lead to malnutrition even if you're consuming enough calories. Here's something most preppers ignore until it's too late: nutritional balance under stress. Your body needs carbohydrates for quick energy, proteins for tissue repair and muscle maintenance, and fats for sustained caloric intake. If you only stockpile rice and beans, you'll survive, but you won't thrive, and your body's ability to fight infection, heal injuries, and maintain mental clarity will degrade. Build your stockpile with intentional nutritional diversity. Whole grains, legumes, canned meats and fish, powdered milk, vitamins and supplements, honey, salt, and cooking oils. This isn't about gourmet meals. It's about giving your body the biochemical tools it needs to keep you alive and functional when stress and danger spike. Now here's the uncomfortable truth that most survival content won't tell you. If the situation gets bad enough, you might need to defend your food supply with force. This isn't fear-mongering. This is reality based on every documented collapse in history. When people are starving, they don't care about your property rights or your moral objections. Desperation erases social norms, and hungry people will do whatever it takes to feed their families. If legal in your area, keep self-defense tools accessible and know how to use them. Firearms, pepper spray, batons, tasers, these aren't toys or symbols. They're tools that could save your life when talking fails. Even without weapons, improvised barriers, noise alarms, and choke points inside your home can slow threats and give you tactical advantages. But here's the smarter play: community defense. Defending your home solo against a mob is a losing strategy. No matter how well armed or fortified you are, sustained attack will eventually overwhelm individual defenses. Build relationships with like-minded neighbors before crisis hits. A coordinated group with overlapping fields of fire, communication systems, and mutual aid agreements creates a defensive network that deters attacks and protects entire neighborhoods. Active defense and community support are force multipliers that transform vulnerability into strength. Understand the psychology of collapse. When food riots ignite, violence spreads fast and unpredictably. What starts as peaceful protest over rising prices can escalate into widespread looting, arson, and assault within hours. The 2021 South African riots demonstrated how quickly order breaks down. Businesses were destroyed, supply chains severed, and communities isolated in a matter of days. During those events, the biggest risk wasn't starvation in absolute terms because the country had food. The risk was accessibility and the violence blocking distribution. Your job as a prepper is to stay off the streets, stay out of the chaos, and lock down your position until stability returns. This is why bugging in, fortifying your home, and riding out the crisis is often smarter than bugging out. Running into the unknown with a bug-out bag leaves you exposed, vulnerable, and separated from your primary resources. Unless your home is directly threatened by fire, flood, or military action, staying put with your stockpile and defenses gives you the highest probability of survival. Bug-out bags are backup plans for worst-case scenarios, not first-choice strategies. Let me be crystal clear about what's at stake. Global food crises are intensifying, not improving. Conflict, economic shocks, climate extremes, and forced displacement are documented drivers that show no signs of slowing down. Humanitarian funding is being cut even as needs explode, meaning fewer people will receive aid when disaster strikes. The international community pulled Somalia back from famine in 2022 through coordinated effort, but that level of response isn't guaranteed. It's the exception, not the rule. Severe funding shortfalls are forcing the World Food Program to scale back assistance and refocus only on the most severe needs, which means millions of people in crisis zones are being left behind. When global systems can't even feed people in designated crisis zones, what makes anyone think those systems will protect you when your region collapses? The answer is they won't. You're on your own, and the food you've stored is the only guaranteed meal you'll have when the supply chains break. This isn't about becoming a paranoid hermit. This is about practical insurance against real-world disruptions that happen more frequently than people admit. Weather emergencies like hurricanes, winter storms, and floods disrupt supply chains and grocery access for days or weeks on a regular basis. Economic uncertainty from job loss, medical emergencies, or recessions strain family budgets, and a food reserve becomes a financial buffer. Supply chain disruptions, which the pandemic made undeniably clear, can strike without warning and create scarcity overnight. Regional disasters like earthquakes and wildfires impact infrastructure and food availability for extended periods. These aren't theoretical. These are documented patterns that have happened repeatedly and will happen again. So what's your move? Start now, not when the news announces the crisis. Begin with a 30-day food supply and scale up from there. You don't go from 0 to a year's worth overnight. You build systematically. Diversify your storage. Different foods, different preservation methods, different locations. Secure your home. Reinforce entry points, establish perimeter defenses, create safe rooms, install early warning systems. Practice. OPSEC. Keep your mouth shut about your preps. Stay discreet. Don't advertise what you have. Train your family. Everyone needs to know where supplies are, how to prepare food without power, and what to do if threats approach. Test your systems. Integrate emergency meals into your regular routine to identify problems before you're depending on those systems to survive. And if you want to go deeper, you'll find in the pinned comment some guides and documents that can take your preparedness to the next level. Check them out when you're ready. Because the difference between those who make it and those who don't isn't luck. It's preparation, knowledge, and the willingness to act before the crisis forces your hand. Food will be the first weapon deployed when civilization cracks. The only question is whether you'll be defending yours or begging for someone else's. If this information opened your eyes, hit that like button, drop a comment with your biggest food security concern, and share this with someone who needs to hear it before it's too late. Subscribe now because this channel gives you the survival knowledge others are too afraid to teach. And when the world goes dark, you'll be glad you did.